Your dad was some war hero, huh? Sure, kid, Officer Daniels smirked, and I'm a Navy SEAL. The chuckles that followed echoed across the waiting room. People shook their heads at the boy and his so-called story. But the child didn't laugh. He just clutched the worn dog tag around his neck, a small, dull piece of metal that meant the world to him. 8-year-old Matthew Cole didn't flinch, didn't respond, didn't correct anyone. His silence spoke volumes. Then, the precinct doors burst open. A man in full-dress uniform, ribbons, medals, polished boots, strode through the entrance. The clatter of his heels silenced the room. Not a glance to the front desk, not a nod to the officers. He walked past everyone and came to a stop directly in front of Matthew. And then, he saluted him. Not the officers, not the captain, not the men who wore badges, but the child. And that changed everything. Earlier that day, the waiting room of the downtown police precinct buzzed with activity. Phones rang, officers shuffled papers, civilians fidgeted on worn benches. Among the crowd sat a small boy, quiet, still, focused. His fingers wrapped tightly around a dog tag that swung slightly from his neck, catching glints of fluorescent light. His name was Matthew, just 8 years old. And beside him, his mother Sarah stood at the desk, speaking to the officer on duty. They took the TV, my laptop, but thank God Matthew was at school, she said, trying to steady her voice. The break-in had shaken her, but she kept her composure. For her son. Officer Daniels, a veteran with a buzz cut and years of city service under his belt, leaned casually against the counter. "What's that you got there, kid?" he asked, gesturing to the tag. Matthew glanced up, calm and solemn. "It was my dad's," he said softly. "He was in the Army. A hero, my mom says." Daniels snorted. "Every guy with boots and a buzz cut gets called that," he muttered. "You'd be amazed how many heroes we hear about in here." The desk clerk chuckled under his breath. A few nearby officers smirked. Matthew didn't react. He simply held the tag tighter. His knuckles turned white around the cool metal. Daniels pushed further. "You even know what rank he was, kid? What branch?" Without hesitation, "Sergeant Major." Sergeant Major Cole Daniels burst out laughing. "Sergeant Major? That's pretty high up. Doubt a guy like that would leave his kid with nothing but a dog tag." Still, Matthew didn't argue, didn't cry. He looked back down, his face as calm and composed as a soldier at attention. Across the room, Sarah's jaw clenched. Her hands trembled slightly, but she said nothing. She simply walked over and knelt by her son. "Come sit with me, honey," she whispered. They moved to a bench. Matthew's small body leaned slightly into her side, but his shoulders stayed straight. His silence, dignified and unwavering, cast a heavy stillness over the room. No one noticed the janitor pausing in the hallway. An older man, limping slightly, hands rough with age and labor. His mop halted mid-motion as his eyes narrowed. He had heard the name. Cole. And something in his memory stirred. He stepped outside, pulled out an ancient flip phone, and dialed. "Sir, it's Johnson. I'm at 5th Precinct downtown. You'll want to come. It's about Sergeant Major Cole's son." Inside, Sarah finished the paperwork. Officer Daniels had already moved on, joking with another officer. The boy and his dog tag were a forgotten curiosity. The desk sergeant returned with a copy of the report. "We'll send someone by tomorrow to take photos. Don't touch anything else that could have prints." "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. She reached for Matthew's hand. But before they could leave, the front door swung open. It didn't slam. It opened deliberately. And in walked a man whose presence silenced the station. Full military dress. Ribbons perfectly aligned. Silver eagles gleaming on his shoulders. Colonel Harris. Every conversation stopped. Even the air felt heavier. He didn't pause at the desk. Didn't acknowledge anyone. His eyes scanned the room. until they found Matthew. Then he walked, purposefully, directly, toward the boy. His boots echoed. He stopped exactly 3 feet away and raised his hand in salute. "Matthew," he said, voice steady and resonant, "Sergeant Major Benjamin Cole was my commander, my instructor, and my hero." The boy stared up at him, still gripping the dog tag. Slowly, hesitantly, he stood. Daniels froze in his seat, pen halfway across a paper, gaze fixed, unable to meet the boy's eyes. Colonel Harris dropped the salute and extended a hand. "Your father saved my life, son." Sarah's eyes welled. She covered her mouth as tears spilled over. "These men," Harris continued, sweeping his eyes across the room, "might not know your father's name. But at Fort Benning, at the Pentagon, and across outposts on 3 continents, no one speaks that name without standing a little straighter. No one moved. No one dared to." "When did you lose him, son?" Harris asked gently. 2 years ago, sir," Matthew said. "Mom says he's still watching over us." The colonel nodded, eyes gleaming. "No doubt in my mind. Men like your father, they never truly leave." Then, with quiet reverence, the colonel knelt before Matthew. The action alone sent a wave of disbelief through the station. He reached into his breast pocket and unfolded a photo, edges worn, corners soft. "3rd Battalion, Fort Benning, Aisson-Sib-Union." He laid it gently on the bench, 30 soldiers in formation, and there, front and center with 3 stripes and a rocker, Sergeant Major Benjamin Cole. Matthew reached out. His fingers trembled as they touched the image. "That's him," he whispered. "Yes," Harris confirmed. "The same man who carried me through a live training zone after an explosion that nearly ended my life. The same man on your tag." The colonel rose. "He refused evacuation until every cadet was accounted for. Refused treatment until I was safe." He turned to the crowd. "You laughed at his son," he said plainly. "But that man, Sergeant Major Cole, trained soldiers who now wear stars. General Richards, Cole's trainee. Colonel Martinez, leading the 10th Mountain Division, also his." Silence. Officers sat straighter. One young recruit stood and saluted Matthew. Officer Daniels had gone pale. "I didn't know," he murmured. "You didn't ask," Harris replied. "And that, officer, is the worst mistake a man in uniform can make." Just then, the precinct captain stepped out from his office. "I've been watching the security feed," he said. He walked straight up to Matthew, knelt, and extended a hand. "I'm Captain Reynolds. I'd be honored if you visited our academy. Teach us what silence looks like in the face of disrespect. Teach us what your father clearly taught the colonel." Matthew shook his hand, dignified and composed. Reynolds glanced at Harris. 22 years of service, Bronze Star with Valor, Distinguished Service Cross, and the highest instructional commendation in 3 decades. He turned sharply to Daniels. "My office, now." Daniels stood, shame-faced. As he walked away, Captain Reynolds bent toward Matthew. "Your father's record speaks loudly, but how you carry yourself today, that speaks louder." Sarah whispered, "He always is proud." Matthew hears his voice every day. Colonel Harris nodded. "The best commanders never stop giving orders. Even after they're gone, their example becomes the standing order." Reynolds stood and addressed the room. "Let this be a reminder. We serve all citizens, especially the families of those who served." As the room dispersed, Harris handed Sarah a card. "Sergeant Major's Memorial Foundation. Call. Tell them I sent you." 1 week later, the department issued an official apology, signed by Captain Reynolds. Officer Daniels was reassigned. His new post, community outreach with mandatory veteran empathy training. His first assignment, curating a memorial display in the precinct lobby. At its unveiling, at the center of the display, a framed photo of Sergeant Major Benjamin Cole. Below it, a plaque. "He taught warriors to lead and leaders to serve." Matthew was there. Dog tag still around his neck. Officers now greeted him with quiet respect. Some saluted. Colonel Harris, now a frequent visitor to the Cole home, had become a living bridge to the father Matthew barely remembered. At the end of the ceremony, the boy stood in front of the photo. "My dad wasn't loud," he said, voice clear. "He didn't have to be." Those words echoed longer than any speech. Every year now, on Veterans Day, one chair sits empty in the precinct briefing room, a polished dog tag draped over it, engraved beneath the official military markings, "For the quiet ones who taught us how to stand." And in the Cole home, Matthew still holds that same tag, not just as a relic, but as proof that some names should never be doubted, and some salutes are worth more than any apology.